So we've all heard that recommendation that 5%, maybe 10% of your portfolio should be gold. Once in a while, that might even make sense. Okay, so two questions we're going to cover today are how much gold you should have and then whether or not you can have too much. And that second question might seem like I'm just trolling. I'm sure at least a few of you are thinking right now that you can never have too much gold. And if that's you, go get a Mav. But stick with me and I'm going to explain why it's relevant. Now, the question of how much gold you should have to begin with is one that you should at least have a general answer for. It helps you figure out how much and how often you should be buying over time. And of course, you've got the financial aspect here where you can only buy as much as you can afford. We're just going to sneak past that for a minute. And at some point after you're buying for a while, the question of how much is too much, it does come back up. Because buying gold is effectively sidelining money that could otherwise be invested or put to work to make more money. So to a certain degree, there's an opportunity cost to locking up too much money in gold, keeping from potential profit over time. And if you don't agree with that, we're still cool here. I can't tell anyone how much they need or how much they don't need, but I will give you the math that I used to figure it out for myself. I think we were talking about sidelined money. So if you do it correctly, sidelined cash can make you money too. And that's one of the reasons that I buy gold to begin with. It's one of the few savings options that can actually make money over time. But that assumes asset appreciation, and I personally would never expect my savings portfolio to outperform my investment portfolio. So that means two things to me. First, I don't want to be buying so much gold that I can't be investing in higher performing assets. That might be Bitcoin, that might be equities, that might be real estate, really whatever you're into, but there's a real case where you're so caught up in buying metals that you're losing out on faster money. Now don't get me wrong here, I'm not negative on gold in any way. I make videos about this stuff. I'm not down on it. But the way I look at my overall allocation for gold is that I never want to lock up all of my discretionary income only on metals. Now you'll hear people recommend that 5% of your portfolio should be in gold. Some people will say 10%. I don't really have a recommendation there because it's so dependent on so many things. Your age, your earning potential, whether or not you have a family, 100 other things. It also depends on what you include in your portfolio to begin with. Does that include real estate? And I personally have other things that make it an even harder question, but I guess that is another story. Now, I'm in my 40s. I think that's important to say. And I can buy more gold today than I could when I was in my 20s. I also have that more complicated portfolio. So that 5% or 10% recommendation, it probably made a lot of sense at one point. I know there was a time in my career where I was contributing about $12,000 a year to my retirement account. So buying $50 a month, that would be 5%, or $100 a month, that would be 10% in metals. Well, that would have made sense. But the math gets more complicated over time. And just to paint this out, I'm going to pick a number. And this number, it's going to probably mess with the heads of about half the people watching. There's just no way I can find a number that's going to be relevant to everyone. So for the sake of easy math, let's go with $1 million built up between cash savings, retirement, and brokerage accounts. Now 5% or 10% of that would mean either $50,000 or $100,000 in gold. And at that level, I'd say that that's actually a case where 5% or 10% allocation makes sense. It works out now and then. If I'm young and I only have $10,000 in my retirement account, having $1,000 in gold, and actually it would be silver, that might have been enough. And then at some point, $50,000 or $100,000, well, that would be enough too. But it's almost like those two scenarios just happen to work out. And I've always thought that the better way to calculate how much gold I think is enough really has nothing to do with percentages of my portfolio. It has to do with my expenses. And my initial goal wasn't really to have 5% or 10%. It was to have 3 months of basic expenses covered. And that's where that 3 ounces of gold that I talk about comes from. Now over time, it moved to 6 months, and then a year, and then 2 years. And my expenses have changed over time as well, and 1 ounce of gold just wouldn't cut it for monthly expenses for me today. I have a family. So just again, for easy math, this isn't going to be specific to you. It's not going to be specific to anyone. It's not going to be specific to me, honestly. But again, easy math. I'll use $4,000 in monthly expenses. So if things got turned upside down, whether that's a wide economic issue or just a personal issue, whatever that amount is, it would hypothetically get me through a month. That's really a point where you need to pick your own expense. But using my easy math number, $4,000 a month for 1 year is $48,000. That same $4,000 a month for 2 years is $96,000. So that means a little bit less than $50,000 in gold would hypothetically give me a year for me and my family to get back on our feet. And a little less than $100,000 would hypothetically give me 2 years. And it doesn't have to be a year or two. You don't need to get caught up in the specific variables that I'm using. Maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 6. Whatever you think you need though, that formula gets you to a concrete number, and it might feel like over-analysis, but it's a lot better than just winging it. So in the case of the easy math that I used, multiplying $4,000 in monthly expenses for 2 years, that number would be about 50 ounces of gold. I'm sure a few of you were wondering when I was going to stop talking about dollars and start talking about ounces. Well, there it is, 50 ounces of gold. And just knowing what I might need gives me a number to plan against. Tells me if I get to a point where I'm ahead of that number or I'm on pace to be ahead of that number, there's really no reason to be a spaz and overspend. So in the best case, I'm never going to use that gold at all and I can pass it down to my kids, but it's good to know what to plan against. So I'll just stop again. 25 ounces or 50 ounces of gold seems like a huge amount to anyone just starting out. And this whole topic might even seem a little bit ridiculous. Like some guy is here telling you that $50,000 or $100,000 in gold is probably enough. But this is a long game, and if you're buying gold over time, it works a little bit like a 401k plan does. Now, it doesn't happen overnight, but it builds up faster than you might think. The plan that I've mentioned about a dozen times by now of buying 1/4 ounce of gold every month gets you to 25 ounces in 8 years. 8 years might seem like a long time, but life moves pretty quick. Now, once you've figured out how much you should own, or at least how much you might need, that question of how much gold might be too much, well, that's more about logistics. Now, the way I see this is that if I lock up too much money in gold to the point that I'm more likely to need to convert it back to cash, well, then I have the pain of having to sell it. And I've done that before, and that is exactly why I keep talking about buffaloes and eagles here in the United States. They're just easier to sell. Anyway, totally different topic. Bigger issue is that I would be sidelining cash that I could be investing. And the ideal would be that you're earning in your career, you're earning in your investment portfolio, and you're earning with your savings. But that last one is the hardest. And it's a topic that I'm going to come back to because I have a guest coming on the channel this week, and he does a fantastic job of explaining that whole idea. You'll see that this week. But if I had 2 years of expenses saved in gold, and I wasn't investing in a higher return asset like equities or real estate or Bitcoin, then I would say that that's too much gold. For me, having gold allows me to make investments. I don't want it to prevent me from making investments. Now, you've heard me say that before. Now, the reason for the gold for me, or at least the primary reason, is that if a crash destroyed the equities market or worse, I'd have a start-over fund. Now, for the record, I don't plan for doomsday outcomes. I'm not worried about a new world order. I'm not worried about a great reset or a repeat of the Weimar Republic. No amount of bad advice is going to get me to plan around fear or conspiracies. I'm planning around common sense. So I think there are real scenarios for a minimum amount of gold that a person should have. I think there might actually be real scenarios for a maximum amount too. Now, I don't think that that's a hard number. It's maybe a pump the brakes situation. Because personally, hitting a max wouldn't mean that I would stop. It would just slow me down. So too much gold isn't really a set number for me. It's an amount that prevents me from doing other things. Now, 100 ounces, that's been kind of my immediate target that I use as an answer. I've given that before. And that doesn't mean that I feel the need to have 100 ounces piled up in my basement. It would be more like 20 max, and then the rest would be something that I'd have access to. Either in a vault or some secret locations that I've laid out, like Goonies-style treasure maps. I just have to think that running around collecting all that gold would be fun all over again. So I hope this was helpful. It's the best answer that I can give to a hard question that comes up over and over. Now, if you don't have an idea yet where you should be, I would recommend taking a minute to just do that math for yourself. And if you already have a number in mind or even your own formula, let us know in the comments. It's a popular topic on Discord, and I'm sure it'll be popular here too. Anyway, while you're there, be sure to hit the like button. That always helps spread the word. And I guess maybe check to see if you're subscribed. If not, we'd love to have you. So thank you again for watching. Always appreciate your time. Take care.